Well, joining me now to discuss more of this and what these types of explorations are like, Oceanographer Guy Zajonc, who knew Paul-Henri Nargeolet, who was on board the sub-vessel. Thank you, sir, for making time to speak to us this evening, and our condolences for the loss of your friend and for, of course, all the men on board. Let's just start there and allow us to... sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I'm not sure I can add a lot to the conversation with respect to, let's say current events. What I'd like to reflect on briefly, and maybe tell a story if you're willing, is Paul-Henri, which is, we called him PH. I was part of a company called Deep Ocean Expeditions. We were the ones that pioneered the initial tourist dives on Titanic, but they were a means to an end. They were a means to keep the Russian Academy of Sciences Deep Submersible Program viable, which was the twin mirrors that had lost their funding during the collapse of the Soviet Union. Jim Cameron started with filming the Titanic using them. The twin platforms worked very well. And then we built upon that, that initial success, including doing 2 more projects for Jim. So your person in the studio, Martin, I was part of the company that basically set that up for Martin. But again, it was not a great money-making venture. It was really to keep this really unique and special equipment alive as long as we could. But where I met PH was when we did the first manned dives on the battleship Bismarck, of a historic wreck. We basically went out there with a lot of media to basically clear the way for Jim Cameron to come out and do his 2-hour special on them. But as we came into port, the ships are a small environment, especially when you're spending time out at sea. They're a world unto themselves. You're cut off from everything else. And when you have time with a person like PH, you realize this is a person you would go out on a ship with anytime, anywhere again. Other people, maybe not so much. But when we got back to port, we mobilized out of Cobh, Ireland. And Cobh was formerly known as Queenstown. And Queenstown was the final stopping place of the Titanic. And so this is the Russian Academy of Sciences. This is Paul-Henri from IFAMIR's Nautil program. And some of us who had all made the trip down to see the Titanic. In Queenstown, there's a restaurant, and then below a bar and grill dedicated to the Titanic. The restaurant was actually, sorry for that, I didn't turn that off. The restaurant was themed around the first class passenger dining room. The bar and grill was memorabilia and Irish band in the corner. And we were more attracted to the bar and grill, about 12 of us. And we really looked like, I have to say it, that we just got off a tourist bus. We weren't, still not young people. They'd been at this for a while. And so we sat around the table, drinking out of White Star Line, logoed glasses and seeing the clippings on the wall. And what people didn't realize, that if you went around that table and you counted how many times this group had been to Titanic and seen it with its own eyes, it was over 100. But most of that came from 30 plus dives for PH, 30 dives plus for Anatoly Segalevich, head of the program, 30 dives plus for Zhenya Shanayev, one of the best pilots you'll ever come across, and the rest of us thrown in. So those are those are once in a lifetime types of memories and opportunities to go do and explore something like the Bismarck, like the Titanic, like the Japanese submarine I-52, even the hydrothermal vents, which is a tremendous breakthrough in science, where in the deep ocean, volcanic vents proved that life did not have to purely survive by virtue of photosynthesis. There was a whole new ecosystem called chemosynthesis. So again, I'm blessed to have known him. I grieve his loss as a friend and a former shipmate. If there is a silver lining at all, there's a couple. One, it's put me back in touch with some very, very important people in my life. And we all agree that at 77, for PH to die in this way, which really was catastrophically and quickly doing the thing he loved, there could be, certainly a much worse end to one's life.
And Guy, I actually appreciate the way you took this conversation into memorializing PH there and sharing your stories about him, because it really gives the viewers an idea of the man that was on board, one of the 5 men, of course, this evening. Now,
Right.
before the tragic news broke this evening, the daughter of Paul-Henri, or PH as you know him, actually said she took some comfort from the knowledge that he was in the place he loved most. Is that something you can understand?
The deep ocean is like visiting another planet, and there probably is some addiction to it because it's so special. And I could see, his whole life was that. So I would agree 100%. To be in a small, capsule, in the case, as Martin pointed out, the mirrors were only 2 feet in diameter. 2 meters in diameter, and you put 3 people in there. I called it sitting in the front seat with 3 people in a Volkswagen Bug. But with 2 or 3 miles, I've been about a mile deeper than the Titanic on some of our dives. To have 2 or 3 miles of water above you, it's basically transports you to another world. And he was as much time as he got to spend in that world. Wow, maybe there may not be another person like that on the planet.
It's a really lovely tribute. Look, you have brought up Martin Phillips, the former Sun journalist we spoke to at the top of the show. Well, we've got him back in the studio because he's been listening carefully to your comments there about the type of expedition he went on one of these Mir submarines, these Russian submarines. And I just want to give you a chance, Martin, to respond there to Guy and to share your experiences and, 2 seamen, basically.
I had exactly the same response as Martin. We come down to the floor. I was in Mir 1 with Anatoly Segalievich. We're traveling along, and you see the debris, as Martin points out. But then you see the wall in front of you, which is the side of the Titanic, and you realize it's still 60 feet in the air on the bow. It's quite remarkable. Martin?
I'm just so grateful to Guy for the opportunity that I had and his part in that. It was such a memorable event. And you had all the history and all the romance of Titanic, but it was also the adventure of going where so few people can or ever would go, as Guy points out.
It does create definitely a brotherhood, sisterhood, however we want to put it.
That's what stuck out to me, Guy, from the stories of the camaraderie on board and with PH, is that you'd all go and get your beer afterwards in your branded tankard and you'd relax.
Well, the Keldysh was not a dry boat. In the United States, when we run research vessels, they're dry ships, meaning no alcohol on board. Not the case of the Keldysh in the support of the Mirs. At the end of the day, when the Mirs were home safely and locked down on the deck, it was time to celebrate the achievement in that regard.
Guy, before we let you go, because you've been so generous with your stories with us this evening, I know one element that we're keen to talk to you about is the fact that you actually have been on a dive with your son. If our information is correct, was 19 when you did the dive. And
correct.
Obviously, tragically, a 19-year-old son and father duo were on the Titan vessel as well. So just talk to us about your decision to dive down with your son.
We were 100 miles off of Bermuda. Kurt Newport, who discovered and recovered the Gus Grissom capsule in about 5,000 meters of water, which was a very unique find, also saw a target down there. And we decided, as part of our program, we would seek backing, which we received from Richard Garriott de Croix, who's president of the Explorers Club, to go out and see what it was, because it looked like a wooden wreck, very, very deep. And so the deepest wreck at that time had been 8,000 feet. This one was past 16. So we did. We dove. I had the opportunity to be on the Discovery dive with Mike McDowell. It's the discovery of the oldest historic shipwreck ever. We called it the coconut wreck because it mostly had coconuts and rum bottles on board, or the pina colada wreck, really. And but I had another opportunity to dive and decided again, I've had my opportunity. Maybe with Anatoly's blessing, would my son be able to go down? And he did. He became one of the youngest people ever to go to 5,000 meters, and has since become a writer. It's really inspired him in that regard, and believe it or not, he won the Clive Cussler Award for adventure writing. So there you go. But Was I concerned? Probably not too much. They did run into low battery power on his dive. So rather than being able to push enough water out from their ballast to get to the surface in about 3 hours, it took them 5.5 hours. So I had to stay up late that night to greet him on the deck. So.
Extraordinary, extraordinary stuff. Guy, we do have to leave it there, unfortunately, but we're very, very grateful for you making time this evening, sharing your memories of Paul-Henri and your time on board, and to Martin in the studio as well with us too. Thank you both.